Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in truly across the continent today. We are coast to coast across Canada and the United States, and a big welcome into all our classes joining us for the first time today, and our speaker joining us for the first time today, for that matter, too. For those who are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I am so pumped today because today we are beginning a new epic series. Now, last year, two of our favorite partners were If Then, who we did this epic 15-part series showcasing their incredible ambassadors, some of the coolest women in STEM on planet Earth. You can check out all those programs on our YouTube channel. And Frontiers for Young Minds. Frontiers for Young Minds partners amazing scientists with kids to edit and work together on articles to showcase cutting-edge research with classrooms just like you. So combined, I really encourage you to check out their full collection. I'll make sure all our registered classes have this. We've got 7 programs already in the books in this series and 3 more to come, and you can check out both of their organizations at the links below. Before I dive in with our first speaker, I want to note we do have a Kahoot today as well. So if you're joining us live, you can highlight this as a separate tab. In about 20-25 minutes, we'll get to this. 4 quick questions, test your understanding, have a little bit of fun. Now, I'm so excited. It's my honor to welcome in Jess Fagerstrom. She is joining us from the West Coast of the United States today, and she's going to talk to us today about radiation, superheroes, and bananas. Maybe an unexpected trio of things, but we're going to learn about her role as a medical physicist doing some really cutting-edge work in hospitals and beyond. So I'm so excited because this isn't a topic that we've covered very much, and it's so nice to meet you, Jess. Welcome to the program today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be here with all of you.
It is so awesome to get to feature a new topic, new speaker like you to kick off just such a fun series. And I know you've got a lot to share with us, so I'm going to zip it. I'm disappearing. This is all about you, and you can take us away and blow our mind with some cool stuff you have on the go.
Okay, here we go. Today we're going to be talking about uh, bananas, superheroes, and radiation, just like we mentioned. I am a medical physicist, so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. So, to start, I really like superheroes. I think that they're fun. I like comic books. I like going to the movies. And so we're going to talk about what that might have to do with what I do in my real life at my job. So, to start, I am a physicist. And I think when a lot of people hear that, they think of maybe this person, or maybe the people on this show. But that's not at all what I do at all as part of my job. So I I have a lot of background in physics. I learned a lot of physics in school. And then what I do is I apply what I know about physics to questions in medicine. So it's for the point is to help people feel better. And in order to become a physicist, I did go to school for a long time. I have a PhD in medical physics, and I went to the University of Wisconsin. So that's my friend Bucky Badger. And now I work in a hospital. So this picture was actually taken on Halloween before COVID. So none of us are wearing masks, but we're all dressed up. Nowadays, we all wear masks at work. But yeah, I work. This is in a hospital with a lot of dear coworkers that are they're wonderful friends of mine. And then I also am certified by the American Board of Radiology. So I am a certified medical physicist. So, okay, so we talked a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. So let's talk a little more about superheroes because I think that's pretty fun. So I think a lot of us might have some experience with superhero stories where people get special abilities or powers from something called radiation, but we might not have a good idea of what that is in real life, even if we might have heard about it from some of these cool stories. So we're going to talk about what real radiation is. So radiation, we might have heard is something scary or it's something weird, but all it really is energy that's moving from place to place. And so when we think about light, just like regular light that we're used to in our regular lives, what it is a wave. And depending on how close together the wiggles of that wave are that influences some of the properties of that light. And so the light that we can see has wiggles a certain distance apart. And when the wiggles get really close together, that is the kind of radiation that I use in my job. You can't see it, but it can have some health impacts when the wiggles are that close together. So we're going to talk about that. So when we talk about radiation with the wiggles super close together, we can't see it, but it does matter to our health. And I'm going to talk a little bit about really high doses of radiation because that's what I use in my work. But I wanted to give us kind of a little more of radiation that we see in our everyday life. And so that's why I wanted to bring up bananas, which Jesse mentioned at the start. So whenever I eat a banana or you eat a banana, we're getting a lot of healthy stuff. It's a healthy piece of fruit. And one of the things that we might have heard that bananas have is something called potassium. So potassium is really important. We need potassium in order to live. It's important. It's a big part of being healthy is you have to have enough potassium. And when you have potassium out in the world, when potassium exists, um, a very, very small fraction of potassium that occurs naturally is a radioactive version of potassium. It's K40. It gives some amount of radiation dose, and it's really, really, really tiny. It's a very small amount of dose. But every time you eat a banana, you get a very small amount of radiation dose. So we're going to use that to kind of get an idea of radiation in real life. So I live in the city of Seattle. So this is the Space Needle. And living in Seattle for 1 year, just from walking around and radiation that's just part of our everyday world, that's the equivalent of eating 15,000 bananas. So that is a lot of bananas. And then if I took a flight across the country, so if I flew, say, from Seattle over to the East Coast, where some of our people are joining us today, that's about the equivalent of 400 bananas, that one flight. And that's because there's some naturally occurring radiation that comes from outside of our atmosphere, cosmic rays. And when we're a little bit closer to it by taking a flight, because we're so high, we get some radiation dose. And then there's some other things that we're probably familiar with. When you get a chest x-ray, that's the equivalent of also eating 400 bananas. And if you get a dental x-ray, a set of dental x-rays like I did last week, that's the equivalent of eating 50 bananas. So that's just an idea of some of the amounts of radiation in our everyday life. So what does this matter for healthcare? Why do we care about this? Well, I'm sure everybody here has probably heard of cancer. And one way we think about cancer is when you have a cell and it doesn't know to stop dividing. So most cells that are healthy, they know when to divide and they know when to stop. They know when they're dividing too much. But with cancer cells, it's like someone took the brakes out and those cells divide and then those cells divide and then those cells divide too much, too much, too much. And then that can actually have a lot of health consequences for a person when you have these cells that are dividing out of control. And so what we need to do is we need to put the brakes back on. And one way we can do that is inside that cell is something called DNA. And I'm sure that a lot of people in our audience today have heard of DNA before and maybe know a lot about it. But what we want to talk about today is that DNA is basically the blueprint for the cell's everyday activities. And if we have some way to damage that blueprint, if we can damage the DNA, then actually that's a really good way to put the brakes back on. And so using radiation is a way to damage DNA, and it's a way to stop these cancer cells from dividing out of control. So it's a way to put the brakes back on. And that's really good because if a patient has a tumor that's growing and growing and growing, we need to stop it. And so radiation, turns out, it's a really good way to do that. It's a really helpful tool in terms of healthcare. So radiation, it can have health consequences, but it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a tool that we can use as long as we're careful about it and we keep everybody really safe. So that brings up my job, which is medical physics. And I'm going to show you a couple pictures to show just like how you can apply physics to questions in medicine. So one thing we're going to talk about is health physicists. They do a really important job, nuclear medicine, medical imaging physics, and therapy medical physics. So I just wanted to show you a couple pictures, and then I have a machine that I want to show you after that. So I'm going to start with radiation safety and health physics. These people do really important work. They work in all kinds of different settings in governments, sometimes on nuclear submarines. They do things like they survey new buildings to make sure that the shielding in the building will make sure everybody's safe. And so you can see like the totally different environments that these two health physicists are working in. So that's one branch of medical physics. You can see here's another example, a totally different environment that these people are all contributing to health physics. Next up, I wanted to mention nuclear medicine. So this is a cool branch of medical physics where a patient is given a lot of times a drug that has some sort of radioactive material that's attached to it. And we can use that both to treat the patient and to take cool pictures of the patient. And that actually leans into another branch of medical physics, which is imaging physics. So sometimes when a patient is really sick, it's important to get an idea of what's going on inside the patient. And so it's things like MRI, ultrasound, or CT, some of these things you might have heard about are all different ways that we can take pictures inside a patient. And that's a really important thing in healthcare, especially for things like caring for cancer patients. And physicists do a lot of work to make sure those machines are operating correctly. They help build those machines and design those machines. And then they help with making sure that the machines are running the way that they should. So physicists do a lot of work in medical imaging. And the last thing I wanted to mention is kind of what I do as part of my job. So I work in therapy. I'm a therapy medical physicist. And we have lots of different ways to treat patients using radiation, but I'm going to show you a little video of a machine a type of machine that I use at my work. So you can kind of get an idea of how big this machine is. So this machine generates radiation that we use to treat cancer. You can kind of see how it moves around this patient and it takes some pictures of the patient to make sure that the patient's in the right spot. And then once we're satisfied that the patient is in the right spot, then we can turn the radiation on so that it will irradiate the tumor cells, the cells that don't have those breaks, to stop those cells from dividing out of control. So this is the area that I work in. And I think it's a really rewarding career. It's a way to use radiation very safely. So that's a big part of my job, is to make sure that the radiation is safe and effective for treatment of cancer. Okay, so now that we kind of looked at different types of medical physics, I wanted to mention why I think this job is so cool. So we looked at some bananas today. We talked about superheroes, and we looked at a couple different types of machines. But I think the real reason why most people get into this job is because of the people that are involved. So all of these people that we see these cool pictures of, all of these people had medical imaging done. They all had radiation therapy. So they all were impacted by work from medical physicists. And all of these people have chosen to share their stories with the National Cancer Institute. So you can read about all of their individual stories. And what some of the things that they have in common is that, they've really benefited from healthcare workers who care a lot about making sure that they're receiving the best care possible. And part of that healthcare team was a medical physicist, or probably several medical physicists. So I just wanted to share this slide because I think it kind of puts in perspective why I think this is a cool job. So yeah, so here are the images that I used. I just wanted to give credit to the cool pictures that I used. And so with that, I would love to stop sharing. I had a machine that I wanted to show you.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Okay,
Bring it up.
so we saw some big machines. We saw that that scanner that a patient was going to get a picture taken of the patient's inside. We saw that cartoon, that movie that moved around, that big machine.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you guys, you might have seen something kind of like this before. This is something called a survey meter. It's something that I can use to measure the radiation that we can't see. Because if we can't see it with our eyes, we need some other way that we can tell if radiation is there and how much is there. And you might have seen something like this on movies or TVs. When I turn it on, can you hear the beeping
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so in movies, sometimes you might see something like this called a Geiger counter. This is really similar to a Geiger counter. So I have a couple things over here that I wanted to show you. That some of them will not look familiar, and some of them look pretty normal. So I'm going to turn the sound off on here while I'm talking. So here I have a little chunk of uranium ore in this container. I'm not sure if you can see it,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
it looks just like a little rock. It
Rock.
doesn't look that exciting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my little rock close to my survey meter, and let's see if we can hear any difference in the beeps, okay?
Yeah. So much faster.
Can you
Like the
hear that
movie.
it get
Yeah,
faster?
yeah,
So that's just an example of how this works. But the thing is, I don't actually normally work with uranium ore in my everyday life. So I wanted to show just maybe a couple other things really quick.
yeah. Oh, take your
Let's
time. This is great.
so have you seen something like this,
Like
Jesse?
smoke
Maybe in your house?
detector or smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, one of those detectors.
It is. This is a smoke detector.
Right?
And the way that most of these work in your house or at your school or wherever you see them is they actually have a little chunk of radioactive material in them. It's called americium 241. Um, but what we care about is that we these are really important to staying safe, right? We definitely need these in like where we live to make sure that we're safe. But they do have some radiation in them. So
Cool.
you can hear that this has some beeps all the time, but then when we put it close to it, you can tell there's definitely radiation there, even though we can't see it. And so I had one more thing I wanted to show you because this one's kind of fun. This is an antique.
Oh,
It's just a
okay.
regular plate, but
Yep.
it is an antique. It's a special plate.
Yeah.
It was made by Fiesta Ware, and Fiesta Ware a long time ago used to use some radioactive materials in their glazes, especially this color glaze. To get this color, they had different materials that they used, and so if you find some old antiques of Fiesta Ware, a lot of times you can pick up counts with them because they are actually radioactive. So that's just an example of radioactive materials that are in everyday life.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to talk with you all about. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And that was a fantastic demo at the end. So we've got to, you know what, we're going to do our Kahoot in a minute. So classes, if you want to pull this up as a game pin, we'll play with this in a minute. But there's a few questions we have right off the bat with that demo at the end. That prompted a lot. So is there a difference between the survey meter and a Geiger counter, or is it functionally the same? Is it the amount of radiation that they're able to pick up? What's the deal?
Oh, that's a great question. So the meter that I have today, it's it is a type of survey meter, and Geiger counters are also a type of survey meter. That's kind of a big umbrella term, and there's different types. They do something similar, which is they figure out if radiation is present, but how they work under the hood is a little bit different. This one's a scintillation detector.
Okay.
Geiger counters work slightly different, but the main thing is that they're helping you determine if something that you can't see is there or not.
Okay. And then there's one that we have a few others that were written in really rapidly, which is great. There's one that I want to highlight because I think it's one of the coolest things in science. So why does the smoke detector have that americium? Do they all have that? What's the deal? Because it's such a neat story for everyone to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the way that americium 241 smoke detectors work is basically there's a little. It's kind of like it's just a little circuit, and so there's a radiation detector, a tiny radiation detector in there, and a tiny chunk of radioactive material. And when everything is functioning normally, that detector can tell that there's this americium 241 present. But if something gets in the way and breaks that circuit, then that sends a signal like, oh, something is wrong. There could be smoke in the air, and that detector can't pick up that signal very well. We should alert everybody around that there's smoke in the air and they need to get out of the way. But that's a really good point in that other things can break that circuit as well. So like if you had a smoke detector really close to a shower and you left your shower on for like had a really hot shower and left it on for a long time, and there was a lot of steam in the air, that can actually break that circuit as well. So anyway, that's how most of these smoke detectors work. Is that's a kind of a basic outline of how they work.
An analogy that I always loved is think about a flashlight in a really dark forest and you've got the beam and then something walks in front of the beam. Like it'll block the beam. You'll see it. Might be alarming to you because you don't want somebody to be walking in front of the beam when you're out in a dark forest. Same idea with a little beam of radiation. If smoke particles get in the way, they block it and it triggers that circuit so that we get that big, oh my gosh, there's smoke. We ought to look for something. I'm so glad we covered that. Thank you so much, Jess.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, the classic feeling when you hear a survey meter or a Geiger counter go, is bad news, something scary, oh no. Is it dangerous to be around that little chunk of uranium rock or the plate or anything else? Would you not want to have it near you for a long time? Or is it like the flying or like the banana situation where it's not that bad, it just tells you that there's more than usual?
Oh, so that's a very good question, and it kind of gets to a lot of what we're talking about today. So, so things like your smoke detector, they are part of being safe and healthy, and that's we do need to be smart about using radiation. Um, Being around americium 241 is actually totally fine. Um, it's the type of radiation that it gives off is not necessarily very harmful if you're just around it. If you ingest it, it's very bad for you. And so that's the reason why you never want to disassemble a smoke detector, because then that it's possible that someone could come along and inhale or swallow that very small piece of radioactive material.
Yep.
In terms of the plate, in general, it's totally fine to eat off these plates. I just keep this particular plate for fun to show people that, like, we used to use these types of materials.
Yep.
If the glaze is scratched, if you find an antique like this, if it's chipped or something, I wouldn't eat off of it because then you'd be ingesting it. But it is very, very low levels of radioactive material. In this case, like the smoke detector, it
Yep.
has a tangible benefit for like it keeps us safe. This is just fun and cool, but it really it's not dangerous for me to have it around. In terms of radiation in the hospital,
Yeah.
it's really helpful to have to be able to take high quality images inside a patient, and that does give some amount of radiation dose to a patient, but it's really, really low compared to the amount of information your healthcare team is going to get. And that's important to keep you healthy if they're trying to figure out if you have a broken bone or if you have cancer, or all these important healthcare decisions are made from medical imaging. Same thing with radiation therapy. We are giving you radiation, and in this case, we're directing it at a tumor. But that's a very useful thing for a patient who has cancer, is that we want to eradicate that cancer.
Yeah. I love this nuanced answer. And I think for our kids, a great example is dentistry. So I've had x-rays done on my body just for things, broken bone, what have you. Most kids, you might have gone to the dentist where they've taken an x-ray of your teeth and you can see inside. So it's a little bit of radiation that you're getting. The dentist usually walks out of the room to do that. They usually give you like a little lead coat so that it's not getting anywhere else. But the imagery that we get from that allows us to make better decisions on your dental health, which is your total health. So just a classic example a lot of you might have experienced in grade 4 or 6 today that we have classrooms. And also, don't eat your smoke detector. That's our unexpected takeaway of Jess's presentation. Don't do it. It wasn't likely to be your thing anyway, even if it's smothered in peanut butter, but keep that in mind for the rest of the program today. Jess, we're going to dive in with our Kahoot really quick, test some understanding, have a little bit of fun. So I'm going to pull up the game pin. And Jess, what they win if they get the answers right is our everlasting respect, which I think is pretty
100%.
fun.
Yes.
And if you want to help us out with any of the answers as we dive in, with there's like a few seconds to go, you can certainly give us some hints. But looks like we've got our classes in. I'm going to get us underway. If you are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. So let's get underway, start this off, and then we'll take some nice questions from everybody after we're done. All right. Dun, dun, dun. Question 1, 3, 2, 1. Drum roll, please. What's a tool that scientists use to measure radiation? Okay, we covered this. Is it a microscope, a survey meter, a ruler, or a magnet? Get those answers in, everybody. Let's see what people are saying. Okay, we've got how many answers in so far? 5 answers. Everyone got your answers in? Get them in. Cool. We have 1 magnet. I know there's some magnets involved in some radiation things, so maybe that's where we're going with. Most of you got survey meter, which is fantastic. Awesome. Jess, see, it's nice when you've got an 83% success rate and getting people on.
That's great. And you know what? Whoever said magnet, I mean, we could go into it, but sometimes they do use magnets in MRI to measure radiation. So good job on that one too.
Yes. Just participating is great. Even if you just want to yell out the answers in your class, that's great too. All right, so which of these is a natural source of radiation? We covered this at the beginning. It may or may not be in the title of the broadcast as well, so that should help everybody. Let's see what our answers are. Everybody, universal bananas.
Wow, nice job, everyone. And it's because of the potassium in the bananas. And it's still really, they're a healthy food. It's a tiny, 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 tiny amount of radiation.
Go have a banana when you're done this broadcast. You know what? I should have had one with me. I have them every day. So the next time we do a talk, I'll bring up a banana. All right, question number 3, 2 more to go. What is one reason we use radiation in hospitals? Is it to decorate the reception area? Is it to take pictures inside the body? Is it to heat hospital rooms? Or is it to give people superpowers? I love this because it's something that where we got a different answer for this. It's not for hospital rooms per se, but we were actually covering with a NASA engineer the other day that radiation is used to heat like robots on Mars. It's really featured in The Martian is a really cool thing. So sorry, that's just a funny plug from programs this week. But yes, to take pictures inside the body. Yes. Again, back to those dental x-rays is a great example. Most of you got this right. Let's see what that does to our leaderboard. Amazon Crab has a commanding lead going into question number 4, our final query before we dive in with questions. Is radiation dangerous? You just saw Jess with like a bunch of a plate, elysium, smoke detector, and all sorts of things that gave off a little bit of radiation. So what do we think? What are our answers, everybody? Get those answers in 6 more seconds. Ooh, so 2 of you said, yes, all radiation is dangerous. So Jess, the answer is radiation can be a tool. We have to be careful to use it safely. Tell us a little bit more why that is before we find out our winner on the leaderboard.
Yeah, so radiation is kind of a fact of life. The types of radiation that we talked about today, the types that can damage DNA, you get just from living your everyday life. Like I get 15,000 bananas worth by living in the city that I live in. It's just all around us. When we have focused radiation, or when we're specifically using radioactive materials like our smoke detectors, we do need to be careful to do it healthy. We don't want to eat the chunk of radioactive material in here. And we want to be really careful when we use it with patients, when we take pictures of inside their body, or if we're designing a room where we're going to be treating patients with radiation. We need to be really careful that we're safe about it. Because it can be dangerous. So that's a really good answer to it. But in general, not all radiation is dangerous, and it can be a really useful tool, especially for people who are sick.
So Jess, I want to harp on something too briefly, because you showed it in the beginning, this beautiful electromagnetic spectrum, which is one of the coolest things in all of science. Like if you learn nothing else in your life than the electromagnetic spectrum and radio waves to gamma rays is sort of all on the same field, it is such a cool thing to know. So you use sort of high level radiation or high power radiation in the work that you do, x-rays, you don't use gamma rays in anything you do, do you? Is there any gamma ray stuff that we use in the world for medicine?
Yeah, there is. In my field, sometimes the line between those gets a little bit blurred,
Yeah,
but yeah, so we're using x-rays that we generate. There's some gamma rays within medical physics that people use as some of the stuff that we talked about, nuclear medicine. So when we're
yeah,
taking pictures with those radioactive drugs, we're using in that energy range, in how that radiation is produced is gamma radiation. But all of it is
sure.
kind of the same idea in that it can damage DNA, so we need to
Yeah,
be careful with it. But it can be a really helpful tool.
yeah. Thank
Look
you
at
for that.
this nice leaderboard.
I was going to
Everybody
say, yes,
participated.
Amazon Crab is our winner. If you are Amazon Crab, you can let us know who you are in the chat. But nice, everybody. And I'm really glad we talked about that as a point, because light is a form of radiation. Radio waves is a form of radiation. They're just not as powerful as things that Jess uses in her job. And so I'm glad we got to touch upon that. That's a bigger topic that you're going to learn all throughout your school career, up through university even. So do check that out if you get a chance. Guys, thank you for the Kahoot. We're going to dive in with questions now. So in our next 10 minutes together, we can take any questions you're keen on. So one of our great questions online, Jess, is how has medical physics, or how has the work that you do changed or improved over time? Is there something that you get to do now that you didn't get to do in the past? Do we have better technology? Anything you can share on that?
That's a great question. So the answer is yes. There have been tons of changes, and so I started working in 2008, after I finished my master's degree, and from then until now, there have been major changes and big improvements in things that we can do, and different ways that we can treat and that are available to patients, which is awesome. And so that's one of the reasons why I think my job is cool, and why if you're interested in science, this could be a great opportunity for you, is because there's always something to learn. We're always trying to make our treatments safer and more effective and more, we call it conformal, and we're always trying to make better quality images so that we can see that cancer earlier and earlier. And so like there are always things that are improving, and so there are always new problems to solve, new things to figure out. And so that's part of why my job is really fun, is that there are always puzzles to solve. Like for example, at my last job, we started a brand new program. It was a type of treatment that they hadn't offered before, and so there were a lot of things to figure out in order to deliver that new kind of radiation that they hadn't done at that clinic before, how to do it safely. And so physics, the physicists there, our physics team had a lot of work to do in order to make sure that everybody got treated the way we wanted to, and that everybody got treated really safely. And it was a really great service that we were able to offer to patients who needed it, that we hadn't been able to offer before. And so medical physics is a big part of that process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfect. That's great, Jess. And I love that. Honestly, you're so passionate about this, and always shines through when we have people that just love the work they do. And it leads us so nicely to our next question. So, Alexis wanted to know, how and when did you start getting interested in this line of work? What was the impetus? Was there some experience you had in school that got you keen on this? Spare no detail.
Yeah, great. That's a great question. So when I was in high school, I had a really great physics teacher. And so, I mean, you don't, I had never even heard of medical physics at that time, but I knew I really liked physics. And then I went to college or university, and I continued learning about physics, and I found out that I really enjoyed the topic, and I especially liked kind of the cool stuff. So like the stuff that hadn't been part of the intro physics stuff. When you start getting into like modern physics, that's like some of the most fun stuff. And then I did a summer where I did some research at a proton clinic, so a facility that uses high energy protons in order to treat cancer. And then I was pretty hooked in that. It's it's such a cool application of physics, and that I know when I'm working hard on a project, or I might have to stay late sometimes at work, it's a really rewarding reason, is that you know that this has a direct impact on somebody's care. And so that to me really was a good fit, in that I wanted to have a job that had that kind of rewarding aspect, and I knew that I really liked physics. And so I would say it probably started way back in high school when I had a great physics teacher. So I'm really grateful to that particular educator.
Jess, what a beautiful answer. And it's something that I love in this job is I get to hear from people that, are epic botanists or space explorers or medical physicists, is that like if you have a teacher that has that sort of impact, it can really put you on a amazing career path that changes your entire life. Also, the fact that you have to work at some cool clinics, like these little opportunities where you get to explore new avenues of what a job can entail, often put you onto things that you would have never otherwise found. And it's so exciting. So kids, honestly, like take those opportunities, whatever they may be. If someone says, do you want to try or learn this? Go for it. Because the worst that happens is that you don't like it and then you try something different. But sometimes you find something that really speaks to you, and you end up with a really cool job like Jess's. A quick follow-up. There's a great question on YouTube. We're coming to in a second, but follow up to this. How long were you in school to do this? I always like asking this question because it gives me a nice follow-up. So from the time you started, for our grade 6 kids today, what's their backdrop to end up a PhD?
Yeah, so PhD at a lot of places, there isn't a set timeline. It's kind of how long it takes. You have to do a certain number of classes, and then you have to do a research project that is generally pretty big, and you write some papers, and then you present it to a committee. I had kind of a like, I went to school and then I worked in a clinic for several years, and then I went back to school. So I did a master's degree and I did a PhD, um, separately, but I did it at the same place. I did it at University of Wisconsin. So yeah, so all in all, my PhD took about 5 years, which was about average for my for like the lab that I worked in. So with the PhD and the master's together, that was 5 years. I also did 4 years before that at college, and then before that, I did my
High school.
my grade school and high school education. So it is a lot of school.
Yep.
You don't have to do that much school in order to get into medical physics, but to be a clinical physicist faculty member, a lot of places you have to have either a master's or a PhD.
Well, and I like harping on this because it sounds so daunting. I remember being in grade 6 and thinking, wow, 6 more years to the end of grade 12, and then 4-year bachelor's degree, and then beyond that, up to 5 years usually for something like a PhD. It seems so daunting and so much. And all I can tell you is from the people that we have on this broadcast, it flies by. You end up really young. I know it seems like you're older when you've done that much school, but you're not. You're really young. You have an amazing job. You usually get paid pretty well. You get to work with the coolest people on planet Earth doing just the most fun things for the rest of your life. So it's, again, as you said, it's not for everyone. And even within the field, there are different avenues to get involved in this. But if you are keen on this amount of schooling that might seem like too much, generally ends up being something that people find very rewarding. You get to play in the work that you do. And so I'm so glad when we get to highlight that. So thank you, Jess, for sharing your story. Okay, I love this question from Linda. In a futuristic world, what do you think we'll be researching that will impact daily living? Is there any like cutting edge science within medical physics that we're like right on the cusp of some really cool stuff for?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So, in terms of where the field is going, it's going, there's so many different directions that are, there's so much research that's happening that I am not an expert in all of it, or much of it. I have my very, you know, focused area that I know about, but then I know that colleagues all over the world are doing really cool research in a lot of different things. So one of those things, is ultra high dose rate radiation. So when you deliver radiation super fast to a tumor, it seems to be having kind of a different impact than if you deliver it at the rate that we normally deliver it. And it takes very special machines in order to get up to these super high dose rates. But there's some really cool, promising data that show that it could have a really positive impact on patient care. So I could see that being like, you know, in the future, just like you asked, far in the future, this could be this just regular way that we handle cancer treatment, is like these very fast treatment delivery systems. So that's one thing that's cool.
Sure.
There's lots of other things that are being developed right now, but that's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah. That's amazing. Jess, it's so fun in this job as we get to highlight again all sorts of various careers. Really, it's an amazing thing, particularly in this If Then She Can series, our Kids Frontier for Young Minds. Like, do check out those resources. I'll pass along Jess's articles. I think you're the only author in the series that has multiple article credits. I could be wrong about that. I haven't checked it around, but you're just killing it. So do check out the Women's Science Collection and our entire series. This is just the first of a 10-part series. So lots to explore and discover on all manner of amazing science careers. Jess, time flies when you're having fun. We're near the end of the broadcast. And so all I want to ask to wrap us up is if there's any final message about medical physics, about becoming a superhero of your own that you want to share with us before we say farewell.
Well, mostly, thank you so much for having me. It was so nice to be part of this amazing program. The If Then articles that Jesse mentioned in the Frontiers collection, I wrote with some amazing medical physics residents who have now moved on to bigger and better things. So those are really fun. And then the rest of the collection is awesome too. So be sure to check that out if you get a chance.
Jess, that is lovely. I love when these programs are a springboard to learn more and keep the excitement going. Again, so much to explore and discover. So stay tuned, classes. I will get all those things to you. We will wrap up the broadcast there. Just stick around so we can chat at the end a little bit. But for now, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day.